Hey guys, Darrel Smith here from South Dakota again. I have a story for you. I, um, in my other stories, all of my stories are in my book, and I'm just going through my books, one story after the other, trying to put them in the video form. So anyway, that's what I'm trying to do. This is a story of back again, and I hope you don't get too bored with it. My experience in Vietnam. I was flying the A-4 Skyhawk, which is a small airplane, a bomber, uh, air to ground attack airplane. It's very lightweight, and it has one pilot. That's the only crew member. It carries about the same load as a B-17 during World War II, which had a bomb load of about the same, but it had a crew of about, I don't know what it was, 8 or 9, 10 people. So it was a very cheap airplane and had only one pilot, one person. Vietnam was not a nice place to fly airplanes. Our base was on a flat, sandy, dirty clay area. The sand in the summertime or when it was a dry time was a problem. And then during the monsoon season, the muddy water squirted up through the runway and was also a problem. Our little aircrafts became, they were mistreated and became very dirty. The inside instrument panels were usually covered with a big layer of red dust. I remember leading a flight on a bombing mission, and after we had put bombs on target, we were headed back home or back to our base, and I was horsing around a little bit, and I did a low pass by a Marine, by a hilltop that were our Marines were there. I was very close, and I can remember those young Marines standing up, casually waving as I went zooming by. Well, I probably carried a little too far in that after leaving that hilltop, I flew upside down for a while, and that requires negative G's, and the all kinds of stuff, sand, dust, papers, who knows what, rained down upon me. I'll never do that again. Anyway, these little aircraft were mistreated and they were dirty. A lot of the maintenance was done right on the line where we were flying. If it was a little heavier maintenance, they pulled them into tent hangars and did the work. But at a certain time, after a certain number of hours, they all required major overhaul. And they would overhaul these airplanes, and when they came out of that particular overhaul, they looked like new airplanes and flew like new airplanes. Well, one of our aircraft in our squadron needed to go for a major overhaul. That overhaul was done. The nearest one was in Atsugi, Japan. In order to get there, it was 2 long overwater flights from Vietnam to the Philippines and Philippines to Japan, and they and if that had happened in the United States, it probably wouldn't have happened in the United States. They would just said, no, we can't do that. But in Vietnam, since the war was going on, it was a special thing. They just said, get it done. Well, they selected me to fly that flight. I flew. I got the old dirty little airplane airborne, gear up, flap cert, then turned out over the South China Sea toward the Philippines. After 100 miles or so, my radio and my nav aids, navigation system, were in up. So for the next 600 miles, I flew with no communication and no navigation until I got close enough to the Philippines so that I could pick up the Philippine radio and navigation. If I'd have gone down out in the halfway across, they probably wouldn't even look for me for a long time, because I don't know if anybody knew I was gone. So anyway, I finally a navigation needle started to spin and eventually pointed in a direction, and I discovered that I was well north of the track that I expected to be with. I contacted the Philippine Air Traffic Control. I had been told before I left Vietnam that they would be expecting me and they'd know who I was. Well, they didn't know who I was and they weren't expecting me, and there was a language barrier. So I chatted with them for a little bit, trying to tell them who I was and where I was going, and they didn't understand. So I thanked them very much for their service and contacted the Naval Air Station in the Philippines. And well, they welcomed me as if I was a local flight and cleared me to land, told me where to park, and that was the end of that crossing. I was happy that that long distance alone crossing was over. I don't remember if I stayed overnight or not. I just can't. It's been a long time ago, so I can't remember. I do remember when I was planning my flight the next day up to Iwakuni. I stopped in Iwakuni on my way to Atsugi. I chatted with a colonel, a Marine Corps colonel, who was flying the same type aircraft. We chatted a little bit and found out we were both going to Iwakuni, and I suggested that we fly together, and he thought that would be a good idea. And he wanted me to fly his wing, and I said that's okay too. I was happy with that. I would be at least to have another aircraft on another long overwater flight. We took off, and my colonel leader, we were supposed to go to almost directly northwest, and he turned to the southeast, the opposite direction. I couldn't understand it for a minute, and I did not say anything for a minute. I gave him a time to reconsider or change his direction, but he seemed to be happy with what he was doing, and so he was headed to the southeast. I said, "Sir, check your course." He did not reply. The aircraft slowly started to turn, and he came around to the northwest to the proper course. We made it to Iwakuni, no problem. In Iwakuni, I know I stayed overnight there, and it was nice to have a clean bed, clean sheets, good food, hot showers. The flight the next day up to Atsugi was not very long, but maybe an hour or so, but they had fueled the aircraft as if it was a much longer flight. I didn't think that was a problem. I took off and I flew my Mount Fuji, which is a beautiful, beautiful mountain on the way, and it was a beautiful day. I arrived over Atsugi, and I was too heavy to land. I had too much fuel. I didn't think it was a problem. I made a long, slow flight over the city, a sprawling city of Tokyo, made a big circle, came back around over Atsugi, and I was still too heavy. So I said, I'll do another loop around there. So I started another loop, but I kind of got bored with it. And so I just opened the dump switch, which we had, and we used often if we needed it. And I dumped fuel to bring me down to a level of fuel where my weight was correct. I asked for landing instructions, and they gave them to me. I made a successful landing and taxied to the maintenance facility. as I'm shutting down my engine and going through my shutdown procedures, official looking pickup showed up at my aircraft. When I climbed down the ladder, this Navy guy said, "The base commander wants to see you immediately." So I went with him and we drove over to the base commander and he escorted me into his office and he said, "Did you dump fuel over Tokyo?" I had to admit the dastardly deed. I did. I said, "Yes, sir, I did." And I said, "I just came from Vietnam, and in Vietnam, we can do just about anything we want to with our aircraft if we bring it back in one piece, and that including dumping fuel." And I apologize. He said, "There's a C-130 parked on the ramp out there with the engines running. I want you on that aircraft immediately." I picked up my travel bag and charged across the ramp, and there was a door open in the back of the aircraft, and I tumbled into that door, and it started taxiing for takeoff right away. I thought it was probably a scheduled flight, just a service flight, but there were no other passengers, and there was no luggage or cargo. Could that base commander have created that flight just to get this dumb A-4 pilot out of town before the Japanese came looking for him? I never heard any more about it. But from that moment on, I was very careful as to where I chose to take a dump. Thank you.